Evening all, welcome back to Dust. Now this is a very kind of standard game, nothing terribly exciting about this particular round. I just thought I would show you it because I think, it's a funny kind of thing going through my head at the moment, and I thought I'd share it with you, which is map design. One of the things I think Dust has done relatively interestingly, but not terribly well, maybe, is map design. I think if you remember back, those of you who are veterans will remember that this map was actually called Manus Peak, which was, I think, one of the original maps. Post in the comments if I got that wrong, but I do remember certainly this was I think it was the first map I played, and what we were playing here, if you look at the actual extents of this map, not including the red line, so if you take the inside of that red line, this is an incredibly small map compared to what the original game had. Now, I will go and sift through my footage because I do recall there being quite a large variant of Manus Peak, which had obviously the massive mountain on it that you could climb all the way up to and snipe from. Great idea there, CCP. And I joke, it wasn't bad, it wasn't a terrible idea, but when unfortunately everybody just abused it because it was a bit shit. People fought, and it was kind of crazy because the way up to that sniper point, which was higher than anything on the map, was actually on one side of the map. So if you spawned on one side of the map, you had the full advantage, which unfortunately we still have. So on this map, as you see here, as of today, this map is benefiting the people who start with the high ground over the low ground, always. I mean, it's just unbelievably benefiting them. So it's kind of, it kind of sucks that that's the way it is. And I think maybe that's a good case for my argument that map design has been interesting, but not necessarily terribly fair. But I would also propose to you a counter argument that sometimes fairness can go suck balls, because you look at some of the maps that are out there, like, remember the Counter-Strike maps, Dust 2 I think it was. Dust was just the map Dust in Counter-Strike was a great example of how stupid and boring game design can be when you actually put equidistant points and routes that are fair to everybody into a game. I think it was unbelievable and unrealistic. Whereas if you look at Unreal Tournament, that actually did maps and levels which were, I guess, just generally quite difficult and challenging and tactical to play because you had bottlenecks in some of them. So I think it's a funny thing really, because it's always difficult to know what to design. For example, here's a thought for you. If Legion ever happens, which I hope it does, one of the first things I'm really curious to see is a boarding map. So, Legion will undoubtedly, have some form of boarding map. From that new trailer they did for Dust, it was evident that there was going to be some form of ship-to-ship boarding Dust style play. And what you had in there was obviously a map where you fight into a ship. Now, in theory, taking general ship logic and design, one would assume that all ships generally would be built with the ability to defend being paramount. So any attacker trying to get to the bridge or to the engine rooms or to whatever it may be would have the massive disadvantage of bottlenecks and castle style defenses. Now I would love to see that in this. Now Unreal Tournament did this really well. If you remember the operation missions, I think they were called operations, but they were basically against the clock, and you had to do a series of objectives to attack a base, blow a hole, get into the base, then do this and do that. And what that then meant was you then scored a time, and then you would kind of challenge yourself against that on the other side defending. And I think Dust could really do with that. I think it almost needs to be an attack and defend style thing where you could have two ships lock in Eve, and then what happens is they basically then fight and repel each other. So the maps could be the same because ships are the same. And it could, or with a variant, but it could then be that you have an attacking group attacking into the ship, and they have X number of minutes to get to the bridge and then do it before the defenses go back online, and then hundreds of turrets then shoot them down. Or it could, and then if they do, then they get repelled back into their ship to defend against the counter attack from the Eve mercenaries. So you see what I mean? There's plenty of really exciting stuff that I would love to see come through. So, and that really, again, coming back to my original point about level design, level design is key to this, and I think what Dust has done is actually worthy of praise, because they haven't tried to make unbelievable maps like most multiplayer maps, like Destiny's maps. Load of bollocks, literally just a completely formulaic, pre-designed group of maps where they're trying to make everything fair. Total and utter horseshit and bollocks, seriously. Whereas I like the fact that Dust has made, I guess, unfair maps to a degree, but it's also made maps that you could actually look at it and say, yeah, I could believe that that's a real location. People hate me for saying this because I've done this before, but I think Ashlands is a great example. Other than the bugs with getting, you know, spawn pads upon height, Ashlands still is an incredibly realistic map. You could believe that there are multiple gantries, buildings, levels, etc. So to me, it makes perfect sense, and that's really what I think Dust really excelled at. Was the vast majority of the maps had a very, I guess, realistic feel to them. You could believe they were more operational than staged. Okay, now post in the comments, I'm sure many will disagree with me there, but I just feel that personally that was the way. Now the new maps they brought in, like, I can't remember the name of it, nope, I can't remember the name of it, became more symmetrical. So that's really what I'm going on about, is that when you get, you know, symmetry in map design, it's unrealistic and usually a bit shite. And that's, I think, really what I was kind of keen and hoping to not see too much of in Legion. I think Legion should be designed like Eve, in that it's more about the realism. Okay, so they're not trying to make a map, a multiplayer map where people can go and fight each other. They should make maps that, quite frankly, if you're the defender or the attacker, are pretty unfair, because they have a massive advantage because of geometry or whatever it may be. So it's a tricky one, because I do really feel that Legion has to be a hard game. It has to be a realistic, hard, tough game. And if it's going to kind of stand, you know, on its own against its peers, you have to say, well, what are you going to do differently then? Because it's unlikely CCP will make a graphical masterpiece, because that's not important. It doesn't matter how good your graphics are in most shooter games. So that tick is all, yeah, that's almost a cross in the box straight away. You could say, well, what are they going to do? Well, they're going to build complexity in. Okay, tick, that's going to be a good thing that CCP excel at, complexity. So you could have the multiple module fitting suits, you could have vehicles with real complexity and active modules and so on. So that is a unique selling point, big tick. Then you have to look at, well, what's going to define it? Because DayZ is the same. DayZ has complexity. You have extreme complexity in that game. So what are you going to do differently to that? Well, you're going to have an open world sandbox. Okay, good. This is good. I'm liking this. So this then starts to tick the box of open world sandbox. But you then have to say, well, you know, what are you going to then have that is different to Destiny, which is an open world sandbox with a bit of complexity, with a real kind of focus on PvE, PvP, which is exactly what Legion's trying to do. And I think this is where CCP could knock it out the park by making most of Legion happen on ships. I'll let that sink in a second. Legion can happen on the planets, that makes perfect sense, but they've got the backbone of Dust to do that. What would make Legion absolutely unique and never been done before is make it a first-person shooter set mostly in space. So this is boarding torpedoes, this is boarding maneuvers, this is the attempt to take over Eve ships using a different game. If they did that, that would be Eve's biggest step forward, because again, it's going to suffer from attacks from Star Citizen, Elite, Dreadnought and others, which are kind of games that do have the ability to look like they're going to just take it to the next level. Now, Eve is looking a bit old. Eve is looking very old, in fact. When I last logged on and I looked at it, after having played Elite for some time, the reality is that Eve is just looking a little bit dated. It's looking a little bit, I guess, I don't know, stiff. It's not looking very flexible. And when you have that, I think that's not a good place to be. So I think if Legion can focus on maybe being much more of a kind of space opera shooter, which again would be, and I'm not saying exclusively, but I'm saying inclusive of, then that would make it a game, I think, of incredible, I guess, potential, because that has never been done before. There is no simulated kind of first-person shooter in space, properly set in space on ships that can move around different levels, different maps, different ships, whatever. but it means then you have a game that's just astronomically interesting. Now, I'm not saying you have to have space engineer mechanics for the ships to move. I'm just saying make all of the maps in space as best you can, make it on orbital rings, make it on a planet, make it on a shuttle going into space, just make it so that there is the whole spectrum of enjoyment. It doesn't have to be anything like proper. It doesn't have to be mechanics, so you're not going to control that shuttle. It could be a shuttle is taken off and a fight breaks out, and this shuttle goes through the atmosphere into space just in a scripted scene like Battlefield 4, and then it ends in space, and then you have to decide who controls that ship and which, where does it go to? Does it bugger off into the distance to an enemy base, or that kind of thing? And I think people would love that. That has never been done before. That is new and exciting. That is innovative and different. And I think, quite frankly, that would just knock games like PlanetSide 2 and Destiny certainly off their ledge, because that would be taking it another step forward into something much more deep. There we go. These are just thoughts I have in my head. These are the exciting possibilities of what Legion could do. I would love to see it less on planets. I really would. I know everybody seems to want to play first-person shooters on the planet, but I get that. But I think when you could play it in the cargo hold of a Titan, or the bridge of a destroyer, or the hull of a battleship, while a massive space battle is taking place around you, that would be pretty fun, wouldn't it? And I think that would be the unique selling point that the game will need. There we go. Hope you enjoyed that. See you next time.